I am 71 years old and I need to say this plainly before I lose the chance. I have spent most of my life feeling alone without knowing why, and only now do I understand how it happened. I'm saying this at an age when the days feel counted, not dramatically, just quietly. My body reminds me. My calendar does too. There are fewer names on it every year, fewer calls, fewer reasons to leave the house unless I make one. The loneliness didn't arrive all at once. That's important. If it had, I might have noticed. I might have fought it. Instead, it seeped in slowly, like dust in a room you stop using. You don't see it settling. One day you just realize the furniture looks dull and untouched. I live alone now. The house is not large, but it feels bigger than it used to. Sounds carry. At night, I hear things I never noticed before. The refrigerator clicking on, pipes shifting, my own breathing when the room is quiet enough. I used to think loneliness meant not having people around. That wasn't it. I was surrounded for most of my life. Coworkers, neighbors, family. I attended weddings, funerals, retirement parties. I shook hands, I smiled. I listened. I spoke when spoken to. And still I felt separate, like I was watching my own life from a short distance away. When you're younger, you assume feelings like that are temporary. You tell yourself it's just a phase. Work stress, responsibility, fatigue. You believe that once things settle down, once you reach the next milestone, you'll feel more connected. I kept telling myself that. In my 20s, I was busy learning how to be useful. That mattered to me. I grew up believing usefulness was the same thing as worth. If you showed up on time, did what was asked, didn't complain, you would earn your place. I wasn't unhappy then. At least I wouldn't have said I was. I had energy, I had plans, I had people around me most days. I just didn't let many of them see much of me beyond what was necessary. I was polite, reliable, reserved. If someone asked how I was doing, I gave the short version. Fine, busy, can't complain. I didn't think I was hiding anything. I thought I was being efficient. Looking back, I see how little of myself I offered. In my 30s, life filled up quickly. Work became heavier. The days had more structure, deadlines, expectations. I told myself this was what adulthood felt like. You trade freedom for stability. You trade time for security. I made choices that made sense on paper. I stayed late. I said no to things that felt optional. Dinners, weekends, conversations that wandered. There was always a reason. Something more urgent. Something that could not wait. I remember coming home tired and relieved that no one needed anything from me. I told myself I deserved the quiet. I didn't question why that quiet sometimes felt empty instead of restful. Relationships don't disappear in dramatic ways most of the time. They thin out. You miss one call, then two. You mean to respond, but days pass, then weeks. Eventually, it feels awkward to reach out because you can't explain where the time went. I lost people that way. Not through arguments, not through betrayal, just through distance I didn't notice I was creating. There were friendships that depended on shared routines. Once the routine changed, the friendship had nothing to stand on. I assumed that meant it wasn't strong to begin with. I see now that strength often needs maintenance. I married. It wasn't a bad marriage. That's the truth. It also wasn't a deeply open one. We were kind to each other, respectful. We managed a household, paid bills, made plans. We didn't talk much about fear or disappointment or the parts of ourselves that felt unfinished. We talked about schedules, responsibilities, practical things. I thought that was maturity. When tension appeared, we smoothed it over. When distance crept in, we ignored it. We assumed there would be time later to sort things out. Time after the kids were older, time after work slowed down, time kept moving. I remember moments when I almost said something honest and then didn't. Sitting at the kitchen table, lying in bed with the light off, feeling something heavy and unnamed pressing against my chest. I would tell myself it wasn't the right moment. I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want to burden anyone. That word followed me my whole life. Burden. I didn't want to be one, so I kept things to myself. The years passed without announcement. 40s came and went. The routines became fixed, predictable, safe. I was known for being steady, dependable, someone who didn't cause trouble. Inside, I felt increasingly thin, like I was being worn down by something I couldn't identify. There were signs. I see them now. The way I dreaded weekends because they had too much space in them. The way I felt relieved when plans were canceled. The way I stayed busy to avoid sitting with my own thoughts. I mistook avoidance for peace. The loneliness wasn't painful yet. It was dull, a background hum. Easy to ignore as long as the days stayed full. It changed when things began to fall away. Retirement was the first real crack. Suddenly, the structure I had leaned on for decades vanished. The phone stopped ringing. The emails stopped. The sense of being needed evaporated almost overnight. People said it would be a relief, that I'd finally have time for myself. I didn't know what that meant. Without work, there was no buffer, no distraction. I started to notice how few people I spoke to in a week, how many days passed without a real conversation. My marriage didn't survive that transition. We didn't fight about it. There was no single moment, just an understanding that whatever we had been maintaining no longer held. When we separated, people told me it was better late than never. I nodded. I didn't tell them how quiet the house felt afterward, how even familiar rooms can feel unfamiliar when the shared history leaves with someone else. The real clarity came with death. It always does, even when you expect it. A friend I had known since my 20s became ill. We hadn't been close in years, but the history was there. Shared memories, old versions of ourselves. I visited him in the hospital once. We talked politely, carefully. We avoided the past, avoided regret, avoided saying what we had meant to each other. I told myself there would be another visit. There wasn't. When he died, I felt a grief that surprised me in its depth. It wasn't just for him. It was for all the things we never said, all the moments we assumed could wait. That was when it became clear. I hadn't felt alone because people abandoned me. I felt alone because I never fully arrived in my own relationships. I stayed on the surface. I kept an exit ready. I chose safety over closeness. I thought being low maintenance made me easy to love. What it did was make me hard to know. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. I began to look back at my life honestly, not harshly, just clearly. I saw how often I chose to be needed instead of being known, how I measured my value by usefulness rather than presence, how I avoided vulnerability by calling it independence. The cost was slow but steady. People drifted not because they didn't care, but because I didn't give them much to hold on to. I didn't invite them into the parts of me that were unsure or afraid or longing. I thought I was protecting myself. What I was really doing was practicing distance. There are things now that cannot be recovered, conversations that will never happen, apologies that no longer have a place to land, versions of myself that only existed in certain rooms with certain people who are gone. Time does not circle back. It moves forward and leaves evidence behind. At 71, I understand that loneliness is not the absence of others. It is the absence of being fully seen. And that absence is often something we participate in creating. I don't say this with anger or bitterness, just recognition. I did what I knew how to do. I made the best choices I could with the awareness I had. That doesn't undo the outcome. If you are listening to this and you are younger, I'm not telling you what to do. I wouldn't dare. Lives are complicated. People are complicated. I can only tell you what I wish I had understood earlier. Presence matters more than efficiency. Saying the uncomfortable thing matters more than keeping things smooth. Letting someone see you imperfectly matters more than being easy. There is a cost to postponement that doesn't show up right away. It collects quietly. I am not without gratitude. I had good years. I had moments of connection. I had love, even if I didn't always recognize it while it was there. But gratitude and sorrow can exist together. They do now. I don't have many years left. That's not a complaint. It's just a fact. I move through my days more slowly. I choose my words more carefully. I feel the weight of time in ordinary moments. When loneliness comes now, I sit with it. I don't distract myself the way I used to. I let it remind me of what mattered. If this reaches someone who still has time to speak openly, to show up more fully, to risk being known, then this has served its purpose. As for me, I live with the understanding I arrived at late. I accept it. I carry it quietly. That is all I have left to do.